Next on the agenda, it's my privilege to introduce our first speaker, Will Bowen. And in July of 2016, Will Bowen handed out 250 purple bracelets, inviting people to use them as a tool to eradicate complaining from their lives. That's huge. His idea exploded around the world, and to date, more than 11 million purple complaint-free bracelets have been sent to people in over 106 countries. Among others, Bowen has been featured on Oprah. It doesn't look like Oprah. That doesn't look like Oprah. Still doesn't look like Oprah. Anyway, you all know what Oprah looks like. NBC News Today, CBS Sunday Morning. I apologize, Will. It's not CBS either. The ABC World News Tonight and the Fox News Channel. The complaint-free movement he began has been featured in thousands of newspaper and magazine articles, including People magazine, Newsweek, The Wall Street Journal, O magazine, Self magazine, and Chicken Soup for the Soul. Will personally presented the 6 millionth complaint-free bracelet to Dr. Maya Angelou, who provided the foreword for his A Complaint-Free World book. How to Stop Complaining and Start Enjoying Your Life, Enjoying the Life You Always Wanted. That book has sold more than 2 million copies worldwide in 28 languages, and it's an amazing book. Will Bowen is a #1 international best-selling author, a multi-number one Amazon best-selling author, an award-winning trainer, the 2016 Purdue University Executive in Residence, and he is the world authority on complaining, which is quite an honor. What causes it and why we do it and how to get ourselves and others to stop. You know, in this world today, complaining is out of control, and this man's going to turn it around.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. That was underwhelming. Let's try that again. Good morning. Good morning. I am here to speak to you, but you're going to be speaking back to me. So, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to Amanda and to everyone here who brought me in. I'm excited to be with you. I have never spoken to an ice cream event before. I was thinking about this morning, that ice cream is like the ultimate emotional outlet, right? Something really great happens in your life, ice cream. Something bad happens in your life, ice cream. So it was really interesting. You probably noticed there were some issues when I was coming up on stage. Did you notice that with the slides? Say yes. Yes. The clicker was literally running backwards. I have never had that happen before, but considering my thing is on complaining, I'm always thinking, these people are testing me. I actually did a speech a couple of weeks ago, and the person who introduced me thought it would be funny to go to Amazon and read my 1-star reviews just to see if I would complain. So anyway, I think we're off to a pretty good start. Let me go back here just a little bit. Okay, all right. Good morning. Let me start again. Good morning. To be honest with me. How many of you, before you came to this event, before you saw all the materials that I was going to be here, before you heard my introduction, how many of you have never heard of me before? Please raise your hand. That's okay. I haven't heard of half of you either, so we're okay. We're off to a very good start. Let me explain something to you. This is not something I ever set out to do. I never set out to be the world authority on complaining. I wanted to play the drums for KISS. It's just that life took a slightly different tack for me. As you heard in my introduction, in 2006, I was the minister of a church in Kansas City, Missouri, and I was doing a presentation on prosperity. And I asked my congregation, how many of you would like to be more prosperous? So raise your hands. Everybody here, if you'd like to be more prosperous, raise your hand. By the way, this is not hand raising. We're going to be doing a lot of this, okay? Hands up if you'd like to be more prosperous. Okay, I've asked that of every audience I've spoken to on 4 continents, and without exception, most people raise their hand. Most people say they want to be more prosperous. The thing is that for most people, prosperity means more stuff. But most people complain about the stuff they already have. As Wayne Dyer put it so well, if you're unhappy with what you have, why in the world would you want more? So before we started looking at spiritual practices to attract prosperity, what I wanted to do was to get my congregation to just stop complaining so they would appreciate what they already have. So my idea, how many of you have heard that it takes 21 days to form a new habit? Raise your hand if you've heard that. Okay, well, I had heard that too. So what I did was I gave everyone in my congregation, and we had 250 people there that weekend, one of these bracelets, just like we delivered some now on your tables or in little packages. And we gave everybody one of these bracelets with the instruction that every time you catch yourself complaining, you take the bracelet off one wrist and you move it to the other wrist. This isn't something that you wear to tell the world, I support a complaint-free world. This is something that is a mindfulness tool. It's a way of making you aware of when you complain. Because here's the interesting thing. People in our culture complain an average of 15 to 30 times every single day, and they have no awareness they're doing it. That means that complaining's like bad breath. You notice it when it comes out of somebody else's mouth, but not so much when it comes out of your own. And the purpose of this was to make people aware of their complaints. So I handed out 250 bracelets that Sunday. We had actually bought 500. And so we had some left over. Now at the end of the church service, where I used to be the minister, we would always do a thing called the hug line. The minister would end the service, and then I would be the minister. I'd walk back, and I would wait at the door, and everybody would come and hug me as they were leaving. I mean, do you do this at your church? Anybody else know what I'm talking about? So they do this. The thing was, people were not really coming to hug me. They were coming to whisper in my ear. Because invariably, people would say, please pray for my daughter. She's dating a new boy, and I'm not sure about him. Please pray for my husband. He's looking for a job. Please pray for my sister. She has cancer. So the whole time, people are whispering in my ears. Now, I knew that this was special because that Sunday morning, everybody who whispered in my ear said, where can I get some of those bracelets? I need those bracelets. Everybody in my family complains. Everybody at my office complains. Everybody at my school complains. So we gave those bracelets away. We ordered more. And within 10 days, we had requests for 9,000 bracelets. And as you heard in my introduction, we have sent out more than 11 million of these to 106 countries. We still send out an average of 100,000 every year. I noticed this morning on our orders, we just got an order for 500 from a place in Belgium. Ordered 5 this morning. We still send out 100,000 bracelets every single year, and we do absolutely no advertising. So I tried to figure out, how does an obscure Missouri minister handing out something like this, doing a talk, become what 60 Minutes has called a worldwide phenomenon? And I think I've figured it out. It's for 2 reasons. Number 1, there's too much complaining in the world. If you agree, say yes. Yes. And number 2, the world's not the way we would like it to be. If you agree, say yes. Now here's the thing. The 2 are correlated. We are so busy focusing on complaining about and putting our creative energy on what is wrong, we are perpetuating and drawing to us what is wrong. And just so you will know, I was not one of these super happy, upbeat people my entire life. I was raised in a negative, abusive, complaining family, and I grew up to be a very, very negative, complaining person. You've heard the saying that the water in the glass may be half full or the water in the glass may be half empty. You've heard this, right? Yeah. Well, to me, the water in the glass was poisoned. That's how negative I was. And yet when I began to do this, it changed my life, and it has changed the lives of millions of people around the world and changed corporations who have taken this on. It's truly amazing. Again, this is not something I came up with and sought to do. This came up, and I have done it now for 12 years, and it's been truly amazing. So let's get very elemental. First of all, what is a complaint? This is the dictionary definition of complaint. The dictionary says that a complaint is to express grief, pain, or discontent. So which word is in yellow up here? Let me hear you. Express, exactly. Therefore, by its definition, a complaint must be expressed, spoken. Invariably, when I give out complaint-free bracelets, some superstar is going to come up to me and say, I'm going to change my bracelet with every negative thought. And I always say, good luck with that. Because we think on average 45,000 thoughts a day. And let me ask you, are most of them positive or negative? It's okay, you can be honest. The word is negative. Every audience knows this. The words that we speak or the thoughts that we think are predominantly negative. But what we found, this is what's really interesting. Imagine your brain is a manufacturer and your mouth is a customer. So you have a negative thought and the customer buys it and sends it out as a complaint. Negative thought, complaint. Negative thought, complaint. Negative thought, complaint. If you stop complaining, what we have discovered is that the mind retools and you literally begin to think happier thoughts as a result of this. That's why when someone goes 21 consecutive days without complaining, and we have had thousands of people do it, it takes about 4 to 8 months, but we've had thousands of people make it. We don't send them a certificate of being complaint-free. We send them a certificate of happiness because we know the impact this has on people's happiness level. So this is the dictionary definition of complaining. Let me give you mine. A complaint is an energetic statement that focuses on the problem at hand rather than the resolution sought. What kind of statement? Energetic. This is very key. Because you can say something and it will be a complaint, and you can say something and it won't be a complaint. It has to do with your energy behind it. If you're upset, if you're angry, let me give you an example. The other day I was speaking in Savannah, Georgia. I had to fly from Savannah, rent a car, and drive 3 hours to a resort to do a speech in West Virginia. So, finished my speech, went to the airport, flew to West Virginia. We got to West Virginia, I got my car, my rent-a-car, and whoever had used the car before me had smoked in the car. And I don't smoke, I used to, but I don't smoke anymore, don't like it. But I got in the car, drove the car for 3.5 hours, it was pouring rain, and there was fog on the roads, plus there was deer and raccoons everywhere. At one point, I kid you not, I came around a corner and there was a deer and a raccoon in the middle of the road, like they were having a meeting of some kind. All right? Now, I just explained to you what happened, and I want to know whether or not I was complaining. So let me give it to you in a different way. Let me show you some energy behind it. Okay. So I finished my speech in Savannah, and then I had to fly to West Virginia, rent a car, go 3.5 hours. You would think that the rental car company, who has the sign that says, if you smoke in here, we're going to charge you $250, would have taken care of this. But they didn't. And I got in, and my clothes just stunk, and I had to drive with the windows down, and I had to stop at a CVS and get some Febreze, and I'm driving, doing this the whole time. And then I come around a corner, and there is a deer and a raccoon in the middle of the road, and I'm thinking, what is this, a Disney movie? And do you see the difference? So was I complaining the first time? Yes or no? Come on, let me hear you. Yes or no? No. Was I complaining the second time? Yes. It has to do with my energy behind it. Most complaining, I should say all complaining, has a, how dare this happen to me? How dare this happen to me? The center of the universe. And I am the center of my universe. You're the center of your universe. So, let me start by exploding a few myths. I was doing a speech in D.C. a while back, and it was an evening speech, and I was sitting in a restaurant in the hotel eating, and there was two women sitting at the next table. And one woman said, so who is the next speaker we're going to hear? And she said, I heard her ruffling the papers, and she goes, Will Bowen. And she said, who is that? And she said, oh, he's one of those positive thinking guys. So I literally looked up the word positive thinking. We have a misconception in our country as to what positive thinking is. Most people think positive thinking means that you walk around with an attitude of, everything is going to work out all the time. All the time. Everything. Y'all, that's not positive thinking. That's stupid thinking. Because every day something is going to go wrong. I got here this morning and realized that, or yesterday, and realized that our bracelets for you this morning had been sent somewhere else, and I wanted to make sure that you had them. So they came in this morning, and then I went out and they couldn't find them at the hotel, even though we had proof that they had been delivered. Every single day of your life, something's going to go wrong. And every single day of your life, something's going to go right. Happiness and success depend on which one you give focus to. The word positive just means present. Look it up. The word positive means present. We are positive one bald guy on the stage right now. We are negative any women on the stage right now. People who are positive, who are proactive leaders in a negative world are people who do not sit around and say, oh, if only this were different or if only this were different. They say, what is? Positive means what's present. What do we have? What can we build on what we have? Rather than feeling negative and unhappy about what we don't have. Does that make sense? Raise your hand. Good, thank you. The second misconception that people have is that to become complaint-free means to be a doormat. It's amazing when I go and speak to corporations around the world. They'll bring me in to train their employees, and invariably the employees will find out that I'm there because I'm the world authority on complaining, and they'll go, I get it. They just want us to shut up. So I always say that to be a complaint-free person does not mean to shut up and suck up whatever the world sends your way. It means to practice healthy communication skills. What most people do is, if they have a problem, they complain to everybody except the person who can fix the problem, which is pure insanity. Becoming a complaint-free person means speaking directly and only to the person who can resolve your issue. My goal this morning is not to get you necessarily to complain less, although if that's an issue for you, I'm going to show you how to do it. My goal this morning is to help you understand that the complaints that you're dealing with, you don't understand. You are trying to resolve issues rather than the fundamental reason the person is complaining. And I'm going to teach you that this morning. So, the third thing is that people have this idea that we need to vent. Have you heard this? Raise your hand. Have you heard that we need to vent, right? If we're upset, we got to do what? Vent. We got to get it out. That's crazy. If that was true, then wouldn't the biggest complainers also be the happiest people? Think about it. They're venting, they're getting it all out. Why wouldn't they then be happy? That's not the way it works. When we vent, we don't lessen our upset, we increase it. In fact, we stir the pot and we offer everybody else a taste of what's upsetting us. Dr. Brad Bushman at the University of Michigan did a really cool study. This is one of my favorite studies. He took a group of 20 college students and he put them each into their own little private study rooms. He then asked them to write an essay. They could write it on anything they wanted to. They would just write an essay. We're going to give you 20 minutes to write an essay. Then a research assistant went around and picked up the essays, and they told the students, we're going to take your essay to another group of students, and one student is going to grade your essay. Well, the whole thing was a lie. They weren't going to give it to anyone else. The research assistant just took a red pen and wrote this on everyone's essay. F, worst essay I have ever read. If you were the student, would this upset you? Say yes. Yeah, of course it would. So that was their point, was to upset the students and then see which worked better, venting or not venting. So how many students did I tell you there were? 20. They took 10 of them and they went in and they gave 10 of those, chosen at random, a pillow. And they said, we want you to get your anger out. We want you to vent. Slam the pillow against the wall, jump on it, curse, do anything you want to get your anger out. The other 10 students, they said, just feel your anger. Just feel your anger. Just sit and feel what it feels like to feel the anger you're feeling right now. After about 20 minutes, they went back and they talked to the students again. And when they did, they asked them and they did all these tests to see which worked better. And one of the tests that they did was they gave them they came in with a tray, and on the tray was a glass and a bottle of hot sauce. They then told the students, you know, we feel real bad for how that other student graded your paper. Now, was there another student that graded their paper, yes or no? No, it was not. It was a research assistant. But they said, we feel bad enough that we're going to make that other student drink as much hot sauce as you'd like to pour in this glass. So they gave him the glass, they gave him the hot sauce, and they allowed him to pour. Now, here's the interesting thing. The ones who got their anger out, who vented, who jumped up and down, cursed, screamed, just shouted at the world, poured 3 times as much hot sauce in the glass as the ones who just felt their anger. The second thing they did was they gave the students a list of words with letters missing, and they asked them to fill in the words. Here are just a few of them. K-I blank blank, C-H blank blank E, R blank P blank. The students who felt their anger, not the ones who vented, the students who just felt their anger filled in these words as this: kite, chose, rope. The people who expressed their anger took that very same neutral list and they put in kill, choke, rape. So this idea that we need to vent is a myth. Clothes dryers need to vent. Human beings don't need to vent. Now, I am not telling you to bottle it all up and hold it inside. I'm telling you to learn to communicate your upset, your feelings in a way so that you leave positive and upbeat and led in a way to make something better of it. We all want somebody in our life that we tell everything that's going on with us. It's called a primary attachment figure in psychological terms. It's always your mom, usually when you're young, and then as you get older, it can be friends, it can be a spouse. We all need somebody like that. But this idea that by going to them and dumping all over them like they're a dumpster is going to make us feel better, total myth. Total myth. All right. This is an extremely point. It is not complaining to speak directly and only to the person who can resolve your issue. Therefore, if one of your customers calls you with an issue with some ice cream, they are not complaining by definition. They are speaking to the person who can resolve the problem. Eckhart Tolle put it really well in his book, A New Earth. He says, complaining is not to be confused with informing someone of a mistake or deficiency so that it can be put right. And to refrain from complaining doesn't necessarily mean putting up with bad quality or behavior. There is no ego in telling the waiter your soup is cold and needs to be heated up if you stick to the facts, which are always what? Facts are always neutral. How dare you serve me cold soup? That's complaining. Now, I live in Kansas City now, but I'm originally from South Carolina, right up from here. And I want you to know that growing up in South Carolina, my mama taught me that there's nothing more important for a Southerner than hospitality. In fact, the town where I was born, man, in South Carolina, there's a sign. When you pull into town, it says, matchless for its beauty and hospitality. And I asked my mama, I said, Mama, what is that? What is hospitality? And she told me all about it. And I thought, well, my goodness, are you able to be hospitable to everybody all the time? And I watched her. And you know what? You can be. You can be hospitable to everybody all the time. Just don't tell anybody the truth. Invariably, we went out to dinner usually once a week, and the waiter would come up to my mom and say, how was your meal? And my mother always said the same thing. Just fine. Is your steak just fine? Everything good? Just fine. And as soon as the waiter would leave, my mother would look at me and my brothers and say, I ordered my tea sweet. This is unsweet. And one time she said, I ordered my steak medium. This is about burnt. And my brother Dave, God bless him, he was my younger brother, still is, but he was so much younger then. He looked at her and said, Mama, do you see a waiter outfit on me? Who should she have been talking to? I don't ask rhetorical questions, just so you'll know. Who should she be talking to? Now my question for you is, think about this. Who should you be talking to rather than whomever you're complaining to? Who's the direct path to solving your problem? Why are you wasting your time talking to people who can't do anything to improve your situation? I was speaking in Denver a while back, and I got to the hotel, and the driver said, oh, you're staying here? And I said, yeah. And he goes, oh, that's the nicest hotel in Denver. I said, really? He goes, yeah. And he's right. It was beautiful. It was really beautiful. And but I always like to do the same thing when I get into a new city. I drop my bags off and I immediately leave my room. I want to walk around the city. This is what I love about what I do. I get to travel. Have you noticed that every city has a different energy? Have you noticed that? Every city, you can feel it. So I'm walking around the city all day, and I come back in, change clothes, go to the gym, change clothes, go to dinner. So I'm in and out of my room 4 or 5 times, but I don't spend time there. About 10 o'clock that night, I'm going to bed, and I hear this noise on the other side of the wall of my hotel room. And the noise is going, whoom, squeak, 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 whoom, squeak. It's not what you're thinking. I was staying on the 5th floor of the hotel, and the building next door is 5 stories high. And it has one of those giant exhaust fans on the top, and there was a rusty spot on it. So it would spin around. Squeak, squeak. So what does the no complaining guy do in a situation like this? I called the front desk and I said, you're probably not aware of this. Great way to start a difficult conversation. You're probably not aware of this, but, and I explained it to them, and they moved me to the coolest hotel suite I've ever had. It was built between 2 floors of the hotel. I had my own stairway. I just ran up and down it because I could. It was so cool. And I got a good night's sleep. Now, in the past, I would have handled that very differently. I wouldn't have gone downstairs to the front desk. I would have called my mother. Finest hotel in Denver. I'll show them. I'll stay in the room. And that's what we do. We stay in rooms, we stay in situations, we stay in relationships, we stay in jobs, we stay in all kinds of things we don't want to be in because we don't speak to someone who can actually make it better. And that's what we need to do. So, it's so funny because when I first did this, I kid you not, I handed out 250 bracelets that Sunday, and this thing just went whoa. And people were calling me and writing me and asking me questions. What's wrong with complaining? So I've spent the last 12 years reading everything I can on complaining. So I want to share with you what's wrong with complaining. Number one, it's a competitive sport. Have you ever noticed that? It's a competitive sport. Imagine, okay, you're at your office and a colleague walks in and you notice that he's limping. Not bad, just kind of a little limp, you know? And so you say, what's the matter? And he goes, it's actually kind of embarrassing. I got up to go to the restroom about 2 o'clock in the morning, stubbed my toe, and the nail's black. I think I broke my toe. Well, invariably, somebody is going to hear that and say, you know what? I got up to go to the restroom about a year ago in the middle of the night, stubbed my toe, twisted my ankle, and I was on crutches for 6 weeks. Somebody hears that and says, you know, I've got an uncle. He got up in the middle of the night, went to go to the restroom, stubbed his toe, fell over backwards, hit his head, and died. And what does everybody else do? You win. I mean, complaining always... Could you imagine if this had been reversed? Could you imagine if somebody said, you know, I've got an uncle who stubbed his toe, fell over backwards, and hit his head and died. And someone else said, well, I stubbed my toe last night and the nail's black. Everybody's going to look at this person like, what is wrong with you? Don't you know how complaining works? Complaining always goes in degrees of higher severity. This is why when it takes control of your business, it will ruin your business. Complaining is a competitive sport. The second problem with complaining is keeps your focus on the problem. You're talking about the problem. And again, you're talking about the problem. And once again, you're talking about the problem. When I consult with businesses, one of the things I invite them to do is sit down, piece of paper, write out your biggest problem. Now, write out what it's going to be like when you no longer have that problem. Focus beyond the problem. Don't even focus on a solution. Focus beyond the problem, and the solutions will bring forth themselves. One of my favorite stories about how this keeps your focus on the problem. 2 construction workers get up for lunch meet for lunch one day on a job site. And the first one opens his lunchbox and he looks inside and goes, oh, gross. And his buddy goes, what's the matter? He said, I got a meatloaf sandwich for lunch. And his buddy says, what's wrong with that? He says, I hate meatloaf. Buddy shrugs his shoulders and they eat in silence. Next day, same 2 guys meet for lunch. First one opens his lunchbox, looks inside and goes, you have got to be kidding me. 2 days in a row, I got another meatloaf sandwich. And the other guy says, buddy, I don't know what to tell you. Third day, same two guys sit down. First one opens his lunchbox, looks inside. This time he goes, "Ugh," and crushes his sandwich. He goes, "I've had it. Day in and day out, it's the same damn thing. I want something different." And his buddy goes, "Dude, why don't you ask your wife to make you something different?" And the first guy says, "I make my own lunch." If you get nothing else I say today, please understand that you make your own lunch by the thoughts you think, but evidenced by the words that you speak. Complaining keeps your focus on the problem. Another problem with complaining is it's damaging to your health. Complaining causes your adrenal cortex to pump out the stress hormone cortisol. Now, what's wrong with cortisol? Raises blood pressure, makes you more likely to have diabetes, can make you fat, can cause high blood pressure, and even a stroke. Complaining also, people who chronically complain, studies have found that they have the same symptoms as a person with early onset Alzheimer's disease. Those symptoms are negativity, shortness with other people, and an inability to remember and to think clearly. Complaining literally shuts down the part of our brains that we need for critical thinking. Complaining affects our bodies because our minds and our bodies are connected. I remember being a little boy and my grandma would call, my dad's mom. And so I would, be on the phone talking to Grandma, and I'd get off the phone, ready to hang up, and I'd say, my grandmother would always say, "Can I talk to your mother?" And I'd say, "Mama, Grandma wants to talk to you." And my mother would always go, "Hang up the phone." And so I did. I hung up the phone, and I looked at my mom, and I said, "Mom, why don't you want to talk to Grandma?" And she said, "She's psychosomatic." We didn't have Google when I was a kid, but we had a World Book. So I went and I looked, psychosomatic. Took me forever to figure out it started with a P. Psychosomatic. I thought it was going to say a neurotic, sick person. You know what it said? Psyche, soma, mind, body. Our minds and our bodies affect one another. I can prove it to you right now using you as an example. Have you ever been in physical pain such that it was difficult for you to be in a good mood? If that's true for you, please raise your hand. I had shoulder surgery a few years ago. I can tell you that's true. Our minds and our bodies are connected. Back when I was still at the church, I was asked to go and see a woman named Jane who was in the hospital. Now, Jane was in her 70s, but everybody the word robust described Jane. I mean, Jane was so energetic and she was at everything and she always had an opinion. She used a walker, but I'm sure I really think she used that just to kind of bump people out of the way because she was always going somewhere. So I went to the hospital, and before I went into her room, I did what I was trained to do. I went to the nurse's station and I asked the nurse, "How's she doing?" Well, as luck would have it, her doctor was standing there, and she said to me, "Jane's fine. She's had a mild stroke. She's going to recover fully. Everything's going to be okay. We're just watching her. We're going to keep her for 72 hours, but she's fine." So I knocked on her door. And the voice I hear from the other side of the room or from the other side of the door is anything but robust. The voice goes, "Who is it?" And I pushed the door open. I said, "Jane, it's Will. Can I come in?" She goes, "Oh, thank God you're here. I'm dying." I said, "What?" She said, "I'm dying." I said, "Jane, I just talked to your doctor," and boom, the doctor walked in the room just as I said that. She happened to be following me in. And I said, "Would you please tell her what you just told me?" And the doctor said, "Jane, honey, you're not dying. You're going to be home in 3 days playing with your cat. Everything's going to be fine. We're just keeping an eye on you. You've had a mild stroke. You'll recover fully. You'll have no residual after effects whatsoever. And Jane said, thank you. And as soon as the doctor left the room, Jane looked at me and said, Will, could you get a pen and a piece of paper? And I said, yeah, why? She said, we have to plan my funeral. I'm dying. 10 days later, I officiated at her funeral. Jane died. The mind and the body are intricately connected. You saw a picture of my book, A Complaint-Free World. That's one of 5 books I've actually written. I've written 2 on happiness. One of the interesting things about happy people, if you ask somebody, are you a happy person? And they say yes, statistically, they will live 35% longer than someone who says no. Take that in. By simply declaring to the world and to yourself that you're a happy person, you will live on average 1/3 longer. And somebody asked me why that is, and I said, it's because they want to. They enjoy life. They like life. When we complain, when we walk around with a negative soundtrack, our bodies recognize this, and our body literally begins to manifest more health problems. If you've got health problems, one of the first things you can do is stop complaining. One of the best things you can do is stop complaining. Will totally change your life. So, what else is wrong with complaining? Complaining destroys relationships. Studies have found, let me ask you a question before I tell you this. Do you know people who get together who just complain? Say yes. Yes, that's all they do. They get together to complain, right? That's the purpose of their little coffee clutch or enclave or getting together, whatever it is. The reason they get together is complain. Studies have shown that the person who complains the most in a group of complainers will often get ostracized for being too negative. Not the star of the show. They'll turn around and say, you know what, you're too negative even for us complainers. It destroys relationships, by the way, in 2 ways. First of all, if you're in a relationship with someone and you're always negative and always complaining, it drags the energy of the relationship down. Second, if you're in a relationship and you're complaining about the person you're in the relationship with, you're going to constantly look for more problems in that person. And when you seek, you find. You'll begin to look for more problems with that person. This idea of complaining drags down the energy of the relationship. I've been so fortunate to speak to groups of every stripe all over the world. And what I've discovered is that most people, if not all, want to have a job where they feel like they're making a contribution. They want to feel like they're doing something, accomplishing something. And to do that often means that we are experiencing challenges on a daily basis. So I find that most people want to come home from work, pour themselves a drink at the end of the day, and then complain to their spouse about every negative thing that happened that day. And we want our spouse to agree, or at least go, oh, there, you poor thing. Like we're a victim. It seems like we all want to be married to Winnie the Pooh, but we want to be Eeyore, and it doesn't work. I was doing an interview for an Australian magazine recently, and they said, how do you create a happy couple? And I said, it's very easy. You take 2 happy people and put them together. It's the only way that works. That's why your happiness is the greatest gift you can give other people. Complaining drags down the energy in a relationship. The other thing is, like I was saying before, about how it makes you look for things. How many of you are parents? Raise your hand. Have you ever noticed that you'll say something like this to your kids? You always leave your socks on the floor. Well, to the kid, that's a Jedi mind trick. I always leave my socks on the floor. And they do. And they do. There's a group of women I know in Kansas City get together every week for what they call group therapy. They go to a Mexican restaurant, drink lots of margaritas, and complain about the men in their lives. I finally worked up the courage to ask one of them, I said, what's wrong with us men? And she said, you're all dogs. And I thought to myself, you know what? If you just spent 2 hours complaining to your friends that all men are dogs, don't be surprised if you see Old Yeller sitting in the lazy boy when you get home. Because that's what you're looking for. That's what you're looking for. The other challenge with complaining is that it limits success. I've been able to meet some top leaders in industry and government around the world, and what I have found is that the higher you go, the better the attitude. Let me say that again. The higher you go, the better the attitude. People down here always say, well, of course they have a good attitude. They're the president of the company. No, what do you think got them there? What do you think got them there? People want to be around somebody who's passionate, believes in themselves, believes in the company, is positive, etc., instead of somebody who's always whining and complaining. People follow people who paint a vision for them. You will never see a job description, by the way, that says must complain frequently, right? You've noticed that, haven't you? Let me hit you with some statistics. I put these in because I know you're business people. I don't have a lot, but I got about 3 little slides I want to share with you. This is a recent study of 1,400 U.S. employees. 78% of employees waste 4.5 hours every week listening to coworkers complain, costing the U.S. economy $500 billion every single year. 75% of employees say they'd refuse a better job with a $10,000 raise if they had to work alongside of a complainer. And this one is our most important stat. 1 out of every 10 people quit their job because of complaining coworkers. Now, why is that the most important stat I'm giving you? Because, friends, that's your best people. Your best people. Your employees that aren't contributing much never sit around and go, you know, everybody here complains too much. I'm going to go find another job. It's always your best people, because your best people know that culture is more important than money. Because good employees can go anywhere and make a good living. But they are not going to spend 40 plus hours a week with a bunch of negative people. So this is why it's so important to eradicate complaining in our lives. Okay, there we go. Looks like I had some redundant slides there. There we go. All right. So this is the thing that I always make sure that the companies get that I work with. The reason I want to make sure you get it too is, let me ask you a question. How many of you deal with complainers? Please raise your hand and hold them up. This is called social proof. Look around the room. Okay, we all do. How many? We all do. As I mentioned for you before, chances are you are trying to solve problems that people are bringing to you, and you're not looking at the real issue. Back when I first started as the minister of that church, there was a woman who had been there for 40 years at that church. She had been involved in everything for 40 years. She knew where all the bodies were buried. She knew where all the problems were. She knew everything that had ever happened. So I said, I got to call this woman and get to know her. So my first day in the office, I called her. She came in, and she brought me a list of 19 problems at the church. And I said, you know, these seem like things we need to work on. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this my to-do list. I'm only going to work on this for the next several weeks until everything is resolved. It took me 3 weeks, but I resolved all 19 of her issues. I called her up, asked her to come back to my office. She came in, I told her, and she handed me another list. This is what people are doing to you all the time. And you're chasing your tail, trying to resolve things that are not really the issue. When you walk out of here this morning, you're going to know the 5 reasons people complain. There are only 5. You're going to be able to recognize which one of the 5 they're doing, and you're going to know what to say to them. Does this sound good? Good. All right, let's move forward. Now, let me fess up on something. I wasn't a very good student in school. I failed the 10th grade, and I always like to joke I was an alternate at my own graduation, okay? So, to remember things, I've discovered that I need to come up with acronyms. And so for the 5 reasons people complain, I came up with this. G, R, I, P. Anybody want to guess what the last letter is? E, exactly. Gripe. People complain for one of 5 reasons. Now, let me tell you how the rest of our time is going to go this morning. We don't have much of it, so we're going to move very quickly. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you what the G stands for in a minute, and you're all in one loud voice going to say it. And then later I'm going to ask you for the R. Then I'm going to ask you the I. And going on, by saying it out loud, you're going to take it in a deep level and understand. So, let's try it together. The G in the gripe stands for, let me hear you. Get attention. Get attention. Let me hear you in the back too, all right? The G in the gripe stands for get attention. Get attention. This was the reason I complained. This was my number one reason. I was one of 3 boys in my family. In fact, we grew up with the same hairstyle. We get together, we look like the Blue Man Group on vacation, okay? So this was my thing because my older brother got a lot of attention, my younger brother got a lot of attention, so I just went around and complained about my older brother and my younger brother to get attention. Worked absolutely perfect. Getting attention is not a want. Getting attention is a human need. We are uncomfortable when we don't make connections with people. And I can prove it to you. The next time you're on the elevator here in the hotel, I don't know about you, but when I get on an elevator, I'm usually on my phone doing something, or I'm noticing something, or if it's a glass elevator, I'm looking out like this. And, but I don't just stand still when I'm in the elevator by myself. I'm looking at my phone, blah, 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 until somebody else walks on the elevator. Then I look like a British palace guard. And all of a sudden, the numbers are real interesting. Until somebody says, boy, the Chiefs sure blew the game last night. Oh, yeah, didn't they? Or somebody else says, is it ever going to stop raining? I don't know. I saw the animals lining up 2 by 2. I'm concerned. As soon as people start to complain, they give each other what? Attention. They complain to give each other attention, and then we feel better. Are any of you from a small town? If you are, raise your hand. Small town like me? Yeah. What happens when you drive around in a small town and you see other people? What do you always do? Of course, you wave. You wave. How many of you have driven around Miami waving at people? Something's wrong with you. We don't need that kind of attention, thank you. Not here in Miami, but in a small town, we do. I was doing a speech for the Human Resource Professionals of Toronto. And it was a big crowd, 4,000 people. So at the end of my presentation, people always want books and autograph books and everything. And so this morning, I've got books back there. My wife, Marty, is with me this morning. And so I've got copies of my book, A Complaint-Free World, if you're interested in picking one up. The thing was, this was such a big group, they didn't want me to bring the books. So what they did was they called their local Chapters bookstore. Now, Chapters is like Barnes & Noble, but it's in Canada. Big chain all over the country. So I'm over here actually behind a curtain waiting to be introduced, and they have set up a bookstore over to the left of the stage with all 5 of my books. It was really cool, pictures and everything. And so before I went on stage, the manager was standing over there at the bookstore, 21 years old. His name's Pierre. And I said, I'm just making small talk. I'm waiting for them to read my introduction, right? But I said, how's your store doing? And he goes, my store is the #1 store in Canada. I said, you have the #1 chapter store in all of Canada? And he said, yeah. I said, congratulations. He said, not only that, we sell on average 3 times more products per square foot than any other store in Canada. And I thought, wow, this kid's on to something. So I said, well, are you in a great neighborhood, a lot of money, that kind of stuff? He goes, no, we're in a very depressed area of town. And I said, a lot of drive-by traffic? He says, no, our store is hard to find. I said, well, how in the world are you able to do this? He said that I came up with something a year or 2 ago, and he said it has worked amazing. Whenever anyone comes within 10 feet, he said 3 meters, but 10 feet of one of my employees, that employee must look that person, stop what they're doing, look that person in the eye and say, hi. And I stared at him, just like you're staring at me, like, and he goes, that's it. He said, I watch the closed circuit cameras, and if you're in my store for 20 minutes, you will be greeted on average 16 times. I said, 16 times? Doesn't that make people feel like you're trying to sell them something? And he looked at me and said, we are trying to sell them something. We're a bookstore. We just understand the most basic human need, which is the G in gripe, which stands for? Oh, that was bad. One more, let me in the corner. One more time. The G in gripe stands for? Beautiful. G in gripe stands for get attention. So what do you do if you've got somebody who is coming to you to complain to get attention? What do you say to that person so that they will begin to communicate with you in a more healthy, positive way? Read this out loud for me. What's going well with? One more time. What's going well with? Whatever they're complaining about. Whatever they're complaining about, what's going well? Now you can use permutations of this as well. What do you like about it? What are you happy about? If they're complaining about their kids, what do you love about your kids? What makes you proud of your kids? What's going well with your kids? What are you happy about with your kids? If they're unhappy about their job, why do you like your job? Why did you apply to work there in the first place? What is it you really do enjoy? What would you miss if they fired you? Anything to ask them, what's going well? Now, I just want you all to know I am not so naive as to believe that if you've got somebody who chronically complains to you to get attention, that you're just going to say, what's going well? And they'll change. It's not going to happen. They're going to look at you like the cheese has slid off your cracker. What is wrong with you? I just told you for 2 days everything that's wrong, and now you want me to tell you what's going well? But if you keep asking something like this, what's going well? What are you happy about? What are you joyous about? What do you enjoy? What got you into this? What makes you feel good? Eventually, the people will either begin to tell you what's going well, or they'll stop talking to you, and either way you win, okay? All right, so before I change the slide, we have a little bit of flashing going on here, don't we? The G in gripe stands for? The G in gripe stands for get attention. One more time. The G in gripe stands for? Thank you. The G in gripe stands for get attention. The R in gripe stands for, together, remove responsibility. People complain to be let off the hook. Imagine you give somebody a task. You say, you know what? I want to review last year's sales numbers, and I want to develop a plan for this year to expand our brand. So you tell your assistant, you know what? I'd like this report by Tuesday afternoon at 5 o'clock. And your assistant looks at you and he says, you know, I'd love to have that report for you by Tuesday at 5, but oh gosh, first I've got to go talk to accounting, and I think they're at an offsite. And besides, we know how slow they are. And then I've got to go talk to marketing, and marketing is even worse than they are. And besides, my dog is in housebroken and went to the bathroom this morning in the house, and Mars is in retrograde. They're just going to keep pouring stuff on you. They're rationalizing. They're rationalizing. They're telling you rational lies until you let them off the hook. Their goal is to be let off the hook, and so they'll continually come up with problems. Well, I didn't do that. I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to do this. Whether this is kids, employees, people do this. They complain to remove themselves from responsibility. I was flying to New York to speak, and I got to the airport in Kansas City, and I got on the plane. Now, our flight here yesterday was delayed. 1 in 3 flights in this country is delayed or canceled. That's just the way it is. Knowing that, being someone who flies a lot, I have the biggest iPhone I can buy, and I keep it loaded with movies, TV shows, and audiobooks. So I've always got something to do. So we're on the plane. It's time for us to take off. We haven't taken off, so I'm just sitting there watching movies. I'm happy as a lamb. I know I'm eventually going to get there. I always try and get someplace 24 hours in advance, so I got plenty of time. So I'm sitting there, and nothing happens. I mean, we literally should have taken off 30, 45 minutes previously. So one of the flight attendants comes in, and she picks up the little phone and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, our flight crew got in late last night, and the FAA has a requirement that flight crews have to have a mandatory downtime. That means that you can't get in at 10 o'clock at night and then be back at a plane 3 o'clock in the morning. The pilot, the crew must have downtime. They literally, legally cannot come onto the airport property until the downtime requirement has been met." She said, "But our flight crew got in late last night because of the weather. They're here now. We're going to be taking off real soon." Everybody around me starts complaining. I'm thinking, I want a pilot who's well rested. I don't want to be sitting there wondering if she's nodding off at the yoke up in the thing. So the pilot comes on, and this time it was a male pilot, and we go out, and he says to the flight attendants, "We're next in line to take off. Flight attendants, take your seats." So the flight attendants take their seats, and we are sitting on the runway. I know we're on the runway because I'm a pilot myself. I've flown in and out of there, so I know what it's like. So we're sitting there on the runway, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 45 more minutes, still have not taken off. And the pilot finally comes on, and he says,
Ladies and gentlemen,
"By the way, have you noticed they do that? Do they teach them that in flight school? First thing is they give them a microphone and say, 'Go.'" He says,
ladies and gentlemen, we discovered a problem with one of the generators. We're going to go back, see if we can get it fixed, and we'll keep you informed."
What do you think everybody around me does? Come on, let me hear you. What do you think they did? Complain. I'm thinking, I'm glad they figured this out on the ground. So we're sitting there and waiting for them to do their thing, and I'm, watching movies. But this guy seated a couple of seats over from me, we should have already landed in New York. So he calls his wife, because I presume he was going to let her know when he landed. And so this is his conversation. This is what this guy said. "Hey, it's me." "No, as a matter of fact, we haven't taken off yet." "Well, the flight crew got in late last night, and the FAA requires they have a mandatory downtime, so that delayed us, and then they discovered a problem with the plane. They're fixing it." "Yeah, everything's going to be okay." "Oh, sure, I'll call you when I get there." "Yeah, I love you too." "Okay, bye-bye." Yes or no, was he complaining? What was he doing? Stating facts, which are always neutral. He was stating facts. Really big guy sitting right in front of me. I guess he heard this dude, figured he needed to call his wife too. This was his conversation. "No," not even hello, okay? "No. Well, the pilot, better known as Sleeping Beauty, got in late last night. Then they discovered a problem with this piece of junk airplane. What's going to happen? Honey, what's going to happen is I'm going to miss my connection." "Sweetie, I can't help it." Look, today was the request for proposals. If I don't see the client today, there's no way they're going to buy from us. It's not going to happen. I know because I know. Look, I'll call you if I get there. What? Well, I guess we're not going to Jamaica this year, are we? Look, if I get there, I'll call you, okay? Goodbye. Same question. Was he complaining? Yeah. Oh, yeah. The funny thing was, about 10 minutes later, the pilot comes on. The pilot says, we've resolved the problem with the plane. I've just got to with the generator. I've just got to sign off on the maintenance. He said, but while they were doing that, I was on the phone with the ground crew, or on the two-way. Now, this is a big plane, over 200 people on this plane. He says, I've been working, and I know that most of you, your connections are gone. But he says, I have worked to get connections for everybody on this plane. Except 2 people. And he calls out the names, and sure enough, the guy sitting right in front of me grabs his rollerboard and jumps up and goes, of course, and storms off the plane. I'm thinking, you make your own lunch. You make your own lunch. I don't think this guy wanted to take his wife to Jamaica. He was complaining to remove responsibility. He just didn't want to take his wife to Jamaica. People complain so that you will let them off the hook. Here's the problem that you may be making, the mistake you may be making, and certainly the one that I was, and that is you give somebody a task and they complain. You try and resolve the complaint. So what do? They give you another complaint. You try and resolve that. What do? Another complaint. Exactly. And it's an endless cycle of them trying to wear you down by coming up with complaints. So you want to turn around and put it back onto them, but you want to do it in a way that doesn't make them defensive. This is a magic phrase. Please read this together. 1, 2, 3. If it were possible, how might you do it? If it were possible. You're not insisting that it is possible. There's no reason for the person to be defensive. You are saying to them, if it were possible, how might you do it? How might you do it? And if you keep asking that question, if you keep saying, if it were possible, how might you do it? If it were possible, how might you do it? Again, the person will ultimately either begin to tell you how they might do it, or they'll stop talking to you. And once again, you win. Okay? So before I change the slide, tell me, one loud voice. The G in gripe stands for? Get attention. The R stands for? Remove responsibility. And the I in gripe stands for, together, inspire envy. People complain to brag. People complain to brag. In our culture and in most cultures around the world, it's rude to brag about your good fortune. You can't go up to people and tell them how much money you make or what you drive or anything like that to try and brag. That's rude. But you can complain about what you have and accomplish the same thing. I have a good friend, Brian. He just bought a $40,000 speedboat. Do you know how I know he bought a $40,000 speedboat? He complains about it all the time to make sure everybody knows. We get together usually once a week for coffee. And we were having coffee one time, and he said, some friends walked up who didn't know about his boat. He looked at me and said, you know, Will, when you spend $40,000 on a boat, you think it would come with a better trailer, don't you? So then all the friends were like, oh, you got a new boat. Another time we were sitting there and somebody came up and he said he had the key for his boat in his pocket. And I thought, he goes around with this thing? And Brian said, you know, when you spend $40,000 on a boat, you think that the key would come with a little float on it. Just as a way of making sure that everybody knows what? He's got the boat. But he's complaining, so it's okay. We complain as a way of making ourselves look superior to other people. We either complain about, not you necessarily, but some people. People do complain to inspire envy. They complain about what they have, their good fortune, as a way of making sure that everybody knows their good fortune. The other way is that we complain about other people as a way of trying to make ourselves look superior. This is why gossip is complaining. If you read my book, I say that gossip is complaining. Because in most cases, when people are sitting around chatting about somebody else, are they speaking positively or negatively? Negatively. Why do they do that? It's a way of saying, I don't have that character flaw. You know what I'm saying about that person? I don't have that character flaw. And we don't complain about people who are like us. We complain about people who are not like us. And if you don't believe me, test it when you're driving. If you tend to drive very slow and cautiously, people who drive very quickly will get on your nerves, and vice versa. One of the things I consider to be one of my greatest gifts in my life is my marriage. And Marty noticed years ago that she knew a lot of couples where one person traveled and the other one didn't, kind of like I do. I bring her with me when I can, but in most cases I'm out on the road by myself. And Marty had noticed that when one spouse traveled, if the other spouse just said, listen, can you get a ride to the airport? Can you get a ride home? Can you Lyft, Uber, take a cab? That the romance in the relationship goes down. And they're just not as romantic. And so a commitment to our relationship. Marty and our daughter Star own the biggest yoga studio in Kansas City. So they're always teaching yoga, but if Marty's not teaching, she takes me to the airport and she picks me up from the airport. Isn't that sweet? Oh, there's a problem, y'all. We have two very different driving styles. I tend to drive just slow enough not to get a speeding ticket. In my opinion, my beautiful wife Marty tends to drive just fast enough not to get a parking ticket. One day she was driving me to the airport and I swear I was thinking, gosh, would you please speed up? Gum wrappers are passing us. But when she picks me up at the airport, she always hops out of the car, comes around, gives me a hug, and then I drive home. And it's payback time. I'm just driving like me, but she's putting claw marks in the dashboard. We are all different, and we complain about people who are not like us as a way of trying to, the I is, inspire envy. We are trying to make ourselves look better by complaining about other people or our own possessions to raise our view in other people's minds. So, what do you do if you've got somebody who is complaining to inspire envy? Now, in most cases, let me tell you how this would show up. You're getting ready to have a meeting at your office. It's 8 o'clock. You've told everybody the meeting's at 8. And somebody looks around, Tom, let's say. Tom looks around and says, well, I see it's time for the meeting, but Shonda's not here yet. You can see Shonda's not there. Is this guy really trying to tell you Shonda's not there, yes or no? No. What's he trying to do? He's trying to let you know what? He is there. He is there. He wants you to know that he is there. This is a way of trying to inspire envy. So what you do is say this out loud. 1, 2, 3. Compliment the opposite. Whatever they are complaining about, compliment them for not having that attribute. Well, it's 8 o'clock. Time for the meeting. I see Shonda's not here. You know what I love about you, Tom? You're always here on time. Take whatever they're complaining about somebody else and turn around and compliment them for not having it. That's the reason they're doing it anyway. If you want them to stop complaining, acknowledge what they're doing and compliment them, okay? So before I change the slides, let's go through them, and I want to hear you all. We've only got a few more minutes. The G in gripe stands for? Come on, y'all, one more time. You can do better than that. G in gripe stands for? Thank you. Don't make me come down there. The R stands for? Good. I'm seeing you all, and none of you are having to read this. The I stands for? Beautiful. And the P stands for together? Power. Power. We see complaining used for power in our country about every 4 years. And I'm not talking about the Olympics. And I should say, thanks to today, every 2 years. I was reading that one candidate, I can't remember who it was, literally this candidate ran nothing but negative ads this year. I can't remember who it was, but I do remember it was one of the major House races. This person decided not to do any positive ads, did nothing that talked about how great he was. He only attacked his competitor. Negative campaign ads work, but not for the reason you think. Not at all. We think that a negative... Look, if you've been an ardent supporter of one political party your whole life, everybody in your family is a Democrat or a Republican or whatever it is, all your friends are all, you're part of this group, and you're all identify as being in this political party. Do the people who are running these ads really think that you're all of a sudden going to see an ad and go, you know, I never thought of it that way before. I think I'm going to change parties. That's not what they're trying to do. They are trying to disgust you so much with your own party that you don't vote. And they move one step closer to the White House. I was speaking in D.C. recently. Last year, it was April. And even though it was April, which can be warm or cold in D.C., it was warm. It was 84 degrees. So when I got off the plane, I got my bag, and I took my jacket off. I was wearing a blazer, jeans, and a T-shirt. I just was wearing jeans and a T-shirt. Put my jacket away. And I took a super shuttle. Do y'all know what a super shuttle is? Raise your hand. Anybody have those? Yeah, okay. It's a van that goes to the airport, but then it stops at several hotels. It stops wherever you are. So it's like a shared cab, but in a van. Well, I got off the plane, found the super shuttle I was supposed to be on, gave the guy the bags. He opened up the back door, put the bags in there. Then he came around to the side and he held open the side, and the van was full. There was only one empty seat. And I go to step in and I look at the seat I'm supposed to sit in, and sitting next to that seat is a guy probably about my size. What did I say the temperature was that day? 84 degrees. This guy was wearing a wool 3/4 length coat, Matrix style, buttoned from the ankles to the Adam's apple. He was wearing wool gloves that came over his elbows. I didn't even know they made those for men. Up over the coat and over his elbows. And he was wearing 2 ski masks. Not one, 2. His eyes looked like a double matted picture. Now, I had just left the airport where they told me that the terrorist threat level was at orange. And now I'm supposed to sit next to the terrorist poster child. And to make matters worse, the guy keeps looking at me and going, "What time is it?" It's time to get off the van. Well, come to find out, the guy was on his way to do the Jim Bohannon radio show in D.C., which is a show I had been on. And I said, "Oh, you must be an author." And he goes, "Yeah, I just wrote my first book." I said, "Hey, I wrote my first book, several years ago." So we started talking and everything. I said, "What's your book about?" That's what authors always do. "What's your book about?" He said, "I work for one of the 2 major political parties." They both have people who do this. He says, "My job is oppositional research. My job is to look at the other candidate and try and find everything negative that person has ever done in their life. And then when I'm done, I look at every positive thing that person's done in their life, and I ask myself, how can I spin it and make it look negative? And he says, I've been very successful at this, and so I want to help people who are not running national political campaigns for president, Senate, House. He says, I want to help your local councilman, your local mayor, your local governor learn how to run an effective negative campaign. And then he said, what's your book about? We didn't have a lot to talk about after that. But I did say, man, aren't you hot? I am hot in a t-shirt and jeans. He goes, I'm dying. I said, why are you dressed this way? Part of me was like, is this George Clooney? He's trying to get around, nobody look at him, you know? He said, I used to live here in DC and I developed asthma that got worse and worse and worse and worse. He says, now I live in Florida. He said, in Florida, I'm fine. But whenever I come to DC, if I don't dress like this, he says, I've been hospitalized twice from asthma. And I thought, you know, that's interesting. Your job is to foul the airwaves, and yet you can't breathe. You make your own lunch. You make your own lunch. People complain for power because it works. Because it works, whether it's in a company, in a family, in a church, in any organization. When people get together, people complain for power because it gets people on their side. The term that I coined is enrage and engage. Let me say that again. Enrage and engage. If I come up to you and say, I'd like for you to come with me and let's go change the world. We're going to put shoes on children that need it. You might say, hey, that sounds like a good idea. I think I might help you. But if I come up to you and I say, they're using kittens in sweat factories in Sri Lanka, you know, people are like, ah, and they get all of it, and then they're engaged. People get engaged when they are enraged. This was so true when I was a little kid with me and my brothers. Because as I mentioned, my older brother and my younger brother were really close. Always have been, still are to this day, very close. And so I would go to my mom and I'd say, Mom, Chuck and David won't play with me. Make them. And my mom always said the same thing. I love all three of you equally. But I'm Switzerland. Back to the World Book. Switzerland, a neutral country. My mother got that the best thing to do with us was not to solve our problems, but to empower us to solve our problems. I've noticed this with managers of every level in every organization. They spend their time, let me try that again. They waste their time trying to resolve their employees' problems rather than pushing them back onto the employees and encouraging them to handle it. So what do if you've got somebody in your organization complaining for power? Please read this out loud. Go. Sounds like the two of you have a lot to talk about. Somebody is complaining to you about somebody else at work, about their job, what they're doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sounds to me like the two of you have a lot to talk about. Sounds to me like the two of you have a lot to talk about. If they still won't do it, you say, sounds to me like the two of you have a lot to talk about, and I'll be happy to set up a meeting. But don't get involved. Don't take on their stuff. One of my favorite stories I love is a sales manager working in a company, and he's got two salespeople, and they're both doing equally well. The problem is these two have taken being competitive to a new level, and they are really negative influences in the office because they're always harping on each other and trying to undermine each other. So what the sales manager does is he sits the two of them down across from his desk, and he begins to deal playing cards to them, face up, one at a time. The meantime, he's explaining, I love having both of you work here. You do a great job. Both of you continue to outperform all the other salespeople here by far. And one of them says, why are you dealing us these cards? He says, oh, because when I get to the ace of spades, I'm going to have to fire whoever gets it. What? Well, yeah, you guys are just so competitive and so negative, you take down the whole environment. So I'm going to have to fire one of you. And he keeps dealing. Sure enough, one of them puts her hand over his hand and says, could we have 5 minutes alone to talk? And the manager leaves, and there was never another issue. By the way, the ace of spades, bottom of the deck. People complain for power, and if we invite them to take control of their own power struggles and to not get involved in them, they resolve them, and we're happier. Does that make sense? Say yes? Yes. Good. All right, let's recap. Let me hear you loud. The G in gripe stands for? The R stands for? Remove responsibility. The I stands for? Beautiful. And the P stands for? And the E stands for?
Excuse poor performance.
One more time. The E stands for? Excuse poor performance. The E in excuse poor performance, this is the past tense of the R. Remove responsibility. In remove responsibility, you give someone a task, they don't want to do it, so they come up with all kinds of nonsensical complaints. Remember, they rationalize. They tell you rational lies till you leave them alone. In excuse poor performance, you've given someone a task and they've blown it. They didn't do a very good job. So they're not going to look you in the face and say, I didn't plan well, I didn't do this right. They're going to blame everything and everybody else, trying to get you to let them off the hook. So, what do you do if you've got somebody complaining to excuse their poor performance? Read this out loud for me. Ready? Go. How do you plan to improve when? Next time. Don't talk about last time. I've discovered something. Nobody's defensive about next time. Everybody's defensive about last time. But they don't need to defend their actions because they haven't taken any. So if you just keep saying, how do you plan to improve next time? Unfortunately, what I've noticed is most managers tend to question the intelligence of their employees by saying things like, why didn't you think of this? Why didn't you think of this? Why didn't you plan for this? Why didn't you plan for this? And they just keep coming with more excuses and more problems. So you say, how do you plan to improve next time? All right? This is your last chance. Before I turn the slide, we're going to do it all one more time together loudly. All right? Because you know it. Don't look down. You know it. The G in gripe stands for? Good. The R in gripe stands for? Beautiful. The I stands for? Great. The P stands for? Power. And the E stands for? Give yourselves a round of applause. You know it. That's awesome. Beautiful. Congratulations. Congratulations. All right. So we put on your table a bag of 10 complaint-free bracelets. If you haven't yet, open those up and pass them around to everybody at the table. Make sure that everybody has one. And then once you have one, we got some bracelets recently that were faulty, so we need to make sure these are good. Take it off one wrist and move it to the other wrist. Yeah, okay, these work. You're good. You're good. Now, you remember me talking to you earlier. How many of you are in management or leadership positions? Please raise your hand. Let me tell you the key of leadership. Morale, you never raise morale. Morale filters down from the top. You probably complain 15 to 30 times a day and have no awareness you're doing it. You may think you're an upbeat and positive person. This will let you know. Every time you complain, what do? Switch it to the other hand. That's all you do. You don't snap it. People are always, I'm going to snap mine. I'm like, yeah, do violence to yourself. That's a great way to inspire positive change. You simply need to become aware that you are currently complaining. So you complain, you take it off one wrist, you move it on wrist to the other wrist. Your goal is to go how many days in a row without complaining? 21. So when you start off, you're on day 1. And as soon as you complain, you're back on day 1. Now, here's the way this always goes. And by the way, if you think this can't be done, I've got thousands of people in every country around the world who have done this. In amazing poverty and deprivation, people who have gone 21 consecutive days in a row. But no matter where you are, it goes like this. You're on day 1, then you're on day 1. Then you're on day 1. Then you're on day 1. Day 1. Day 1. Day 1, 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 day 2. Day 1. Because we don't do it all at one time. We go 1, we'll be lucky to get it. Sometimes it can take a month to get day 2. This takes most people 4 to 8 months to complete successfully. But the time's going to pass anyway. You might as well do something that's going to totally change your life and your business. A while back, I decided to redo the Complaint-Free Challenge myself. And I shot a selfie every single day of myself, saying what day I was on, posted it on Facebook, and then my assistant put it into this little video. Let me share this with you. So I made it, but as you can see, thank you. Yeah, give it a round of applause. That's just the way it goes. That's just the way it goes. So I want to thank you for our time together this morning. I'm going to close with the 3 most common questions that people ask me. If you've got other questions, you're welcome to come back. I'll be back at the back with Marty back there selling books. So you're welcome to come back and ask me questions afterwards. But by far, the three most common questions I get in order are, number 3, how do we get you to come and speak to our group or to our organization? Well, you can go to, on your bracelet, it says complaintfreeworld.org. You simply click on speaking when you get there. And if you'd like to bring me in, there's information there. I also have certified trainers who go out and do what I do, who all work with me. Same presentation. They were all handpicked and hand-trained by me. So you can do that, or you can give me a business card in the back and I can have one of my assistants get in touch with you. The second most common question that people ask me is, how do I get more bracelets? Well, if you go to complaintfreeworld.org, you can get bracelets there. We have a business program you can download, and you can actually introduce this to your staff with lots of resources to help you make this successful for you. But hands down, the most question, by the way, if you'll write this down or do this, if you text Will Bowen to 64600, Will Bowen, my name, to 64600. You get, we send out daily inspirational videos. I literally shoot a daily video and upload it. And because you're part of this group, we also have a complaint-free life program, and we give you a 30-day free membership into that, which you can cancel anytime. So check it out, Will Bowen to 6460. Hands down, the most common question I'm asked, and this is what blows me away. I've done all this studying, all this writing. I know so much about complaining. I do full-day trainings on this concept. And yet the number one question people ask me is, what's Oprah like? That's what everybody wants to know. What's Oprah like? And the funny, by the way, this was taken 9 years ago when I was much older. Right after we did this little segment, she leaned over and she patted me on the arm. And Oprah said, Pastor Will, which is what she calls me, she says, Pastor Will, you know, I have nothing to complain about. And I thought, of course not. You're Oprah Winfrey, for God's sake. What are you going to complain about? You're one of the richest, most powerful people in the world. And my poker face wasn't working real well that day because I went to Oprah. And she said, no, you misunderstand. Oprah says, it's not that I have everything and have accomplished everything I've done. It's not because of that. That's not why I don't complain. Oprah says, I don't complain, and that's why I have everything that I have and have accomplished everything that I've done. You see, Oprah gets that she makes her own lunch, and so do you. So make it a magnificent buffet and share it with our world. Would you? Thank you so much for your time this morning. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.